Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to talk with you all about um, the research accreditation process through SASE. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about why we as an organization feel like this is something we want to do. Kurt is going to touch on some industry perspectives, and then Mary, who has been working very hard on this accreditation process, is going to bring it on home with some detailed information. So wanted to provide you all with just a reminder of our clinical trials strategies here at UW, and the fact that this particular strategy is under the quality program that supports clinical research quality and compliance, and also SASE accreditation. So this is directly linked to our strategic plan and what we're trying to achieve here at UW. So what is this accreditation, and why do we care about it? So UW is really maturing as a clinical research organization. We certainly saw this, and it was sped up during the COVID pandemic, but we're getting to a place where we really are ready to move on to the next step. Our participants and our patients are getting very sophisticated, and they really expect the highest quality in clinical trials here at UW. Really, in the past 3 years, we've demonstrated that we are ready to be a leader in clinical trials. We took a significant lead in COVID clinical trials, and we have continued to do that going forward. So we're really in a place where we're ready to be a demonstrated leader in this space. We've made significant gains in our compliance and are moving on in developing more quality into our programs. Our clinical trial strategy is being widely implemented across our health system, which is a wonderful thing. And we're moving towards having consistent systems that support our clinical trials. We understand that we need to change in order to provide the highest quality clinical trials. So what we did 30 years ago in clinical trials probably isn't the highest standard that we could do today. And so we want to make some changes and move forward so that we can really have the highest quality clinical trials. We're ready to develop systems rather than workarounds. We want streamlined and efficient systems that help us get our work done without a lot of re-entry and without a lot of workarounds to our systems. There's really recognition here that there's a wide variability in the skills of our clinical research staff and leaders, and we want to be able to provide training and skill sets for those folks that are really going to move us into the next generation of clinical trials. And we have several groups that are already ready to embrace these standards. They've done so much work. They're really incredible, and they're ready to be evaluated in terms of their quality clinical trials. So why are we talking about this now? Well, we're really at a place where we're seeking to have the highest quality clinical trials that we possibly can. We've moved beyond just doing what we can do and really into a space where we're thinking about quality, we're thinking about efficiency, we're thinking about doing the best that we can, both for our patients and our researchers. We really need to improve the engagement with our patients to be competitive and to truly understand their needs when it comes to clinical trials. We've had a lot of eye-opening discussions with patients and participants, and we want to continue to have those conversations and continue to engage them in high quality clinical trials. We really want an engaged research workforce that strives for the highest quality at all levels. We want everybody to be engaged in doing the highest quality work at the level in which they're employed, and also looking to really elevate our clinical trials process overall. We're now a system of care. We're not just University Hospital. We have added Northern Illinois. We're adding a big research site on the east side. And we really need to reduce the variability between and within our sites. We need to have processes and programs that are more streamlined and that can be done at multiple sites. We need to have overarching goals and quality activities that make it clear what high quality clinical trials look like for us at UW. We want to reduce our waste and improve our efficiency. We want to constantly be striving to improve ourselves and improve the process and delivery of clinical trials. We really aspire to be recognized as a high quality and safe site for clinical trials, not only in the Midwest, but across the country. We recognize that an environment where leadership has quality enabling behaviors is actually critical to our success. So that means we need to train our clinical trials leaders as well. We want to focus on preventing errors in clinical trials. It's much easier to prevent an error than it is to fix it. And so we want to really focus on that. And clinical trials are a differentiator for our health system. And so it's really important that right now we think about how to do the best clinical trials. So, what are these standards? Well, standards in general are widely accepted norms that are defined by any industry. So, for ours, it would be the clinical trials industry. It really focuses on quality management principles. How do you constantly improve and how do you constantly think about managing the quality of your processes and your activities? It helps to reduce variability of results and data across sites. So when you think about clinical trials, particularly multi-site clinical trials, the key important piece here is to be able to have reliable data. And so we don't want a lot of variability across sites. We want sites to be working in similar ways so that we're sure that the data that we're getting is of the highest quality and there's not a lot of variability in it. We want to create a framework that helps us really establish those important activities and how to do them in the best way we possibly can. We want to promote sustainable and reliable compliance. So I have the saying, and many of you have heard it, we want to make the right thing to do the easy thing to do. We literally want to build this quality and compliance right into our processes. So it's not something extra you have to think about. It's actually built into our structure and how we move forward. And we really want to focus on the prevention of problems and defects. Like we talked about earlier, it's much easier to prevent a problem than it is to fix it later. And so we really want that to be our focus. So standards are not something that we're just doing in clinical trials. In fact, our hospital has standards through JCO. Many industries use standards. Manufacturing does, so particularly car manufacturing, businesses do, and even schools already use standards. So standards are great because they help to prevent problems, and it's so much more cost effective to fix them before they happen than it is to fix them after they happen. But because of the inherent risk to our patients in clinical trials, prevention of errors should really be paramount. And that's where standards really come into play. So when you think about it, standards are just something that are really part of our everyday life, and we don't even think about it so much. But one great example in building is you make stairs all the same height. I don't know if you've ever been into a house that has stairs that aren't the same height, but you're constantly tripping up and down the stairs. So that's just something that's really become a standard in building so that you don't have people tripping upstairs, getting injured, falling down the stairs, things like that. In schools, there's a standard that says in 7th grade, kids should have been exposed to the periodic table and know what it's used for. There's lots of different ways to teach kids that, but the expectation is by the time they get out of 7th grade that they understand that. So standards are all around us, and it just makes sense because of the industry that we're in that we should have standards as well. So really what the SASE standards cover are these areas that I've listed here in red. So really participant focus, which is something we're really working on, really focusing on improving the patient's experience, both so that they have great experience in clinical trials, but it also makes our recruitment much easier when patients are having a great experience and they're sharing that with others. Our leadership, we need to make sure our goals are clear and that our leaders really come together to achieve them, that we have a vision and a strategy that really aligns with what we're trying to achieve. We really want to engage our people. So all of you really recognizing and empowering all of you to really help us achieve our goals in quality. We really want you to feel valued. We want you to feel like you're an important part of our research enterprise because you are. And we want you to be able to have a clear line of sight of how your work contributes to what we're trying to achieve. We need to have a process approach. Really, all of our processes are interrelated. And our final quality really depends on how we treat each stage and the improvements we make and how we communicate those. We have groups that have really clear best practices, but they often aren't shared with other groups and not able to be embraced. So we need to improve that communication so that one group who figures out really how to do it the best way can then share that with other groups in a way that makes a lot of sense. We need to focus on improvement. Even maintaining our current level really requires us to work on improvement because clinical trials are always changing by their very nature. And it really opens new opportunities and helps us to think about adapting to what's going to come next in terms of clinical trials. We need to use evidence-based decision making. We need to understand why something is happening before we just change it. We need to rely on data and information to really inform us before we make decisions. And then lastly, we need to do really well with relationship and stakeholder management. We need to get feedback from our participants, from our researchers, from our staff, from our sponsors, and really build strong relationships with all of these groups so that we can be a high functioning research site that really fulfills the needs of all of our stakeholders. So that's what I have for you now, and I'm going to pass the ball over to Kurt.
Thank you, Betsy. It's amazing to see this many people here today. This is incredibly exciting to see you all here, and I appreciate the opportunity to just say a few words about the accreditation and sort of a little bit of its history. Anyone who's come, I think, within 50 feet of me the last 5 years has heard me talk about this in some way or another. And, one of the things I was just thinking as all of these 80 participants, that's amazing, as all of these clinical professionals started logging in, one of the things in my portfolio in the medical school includes a portion of a compliance responsibility that I work on with campus. And at least once a week, I'm in a meeting in Bascom where they explain to me how a certain policy or a certain process will work for the medical school because it works for everyone else on campus. And what's the difference, right? As though the clinical environment is the same as the rest of the campus. And I always say, in disagreeing with that, I always say to them, the head of every quality or clinical research professional just exploded over in the medical school on the western side of campus. And that's something, so I'm particularly glad to see you all here well and in good health. But as we talk about what's different about our environment, I think that's where these standards really are very applicable. The introduction, at least for me, to any sort of standardized accreditation for clinical research sites really started coming to me as early as 2015 by potential sponsors. Whether it was a simple question about whether UW would ultimately pursue something like this, or whether in some cases, I think it was meant as a helpful suggestion. But again, it was a dialogue that started as far back as 2015. And concurrent to our analysis of our clinical research infrastructure and our overall performance, the need and endorsement of these standards really became a significant point in a number of recommendations and publications that were being published in the National Academies of Medicine, the New England Journal of Medicine, and other publications like that. I became involved with ACRES in 2018, and that's a relationship that would transition to the Site Accreditation and Standards Institute when the standards and accreditation were spun out into their own organization. I've been very fortunate to participate directly in the required trainings. And in particular, the latter development and testing and refinement of the standards that are the basis of this accreditation. And in fact, along with leaders and partners from ACRP, I'll be leading the Quality Accelerator Program, which is part of SASE and a supportive network to all sites participating in the accreditation process. In terms of an overall benefit to the field, I think we all would be in agreement on this, that a standard for quality systems specific to clinical research is really very long overdue. And from the perspective of the field, and I think it's very important to note that this work that will be done to achieve this accreditation. It covers industry trials, it covers investigator initiated. It is a comprehensive effort on the part of our academic medical center to really lay the groundwork for improved site performance and an independent attestation of that performance. And for sites throughout the field to more rapidly and easily participate in multi-site studies. And I also think we can all agree it is also very much in line with increasing guidance and emphasis from the FDA on quality by design in concept. In terms of specifically for UW, why have I championed this? Why are we doing it? I think the benefits to the UW are things we can all agree on. First of all, it's really a platform for improved site performance that our sponsors expect of us. And the scoping of the quality systems, that is sort of the foundation of the accreditation, really means that we will be able to use best practices that individual units have achieved and use as a common means to demonstrate that we are meeting a standard. Secondly, the quality of the standard itself. One of the things that I've thought as I participated in this process, I think all of us we probably do this once a week, if not more, if you're like me, where you have that moment. It can be a moment of frustration, or it can be a moment of pride, whatever it is, but you fantasize what would it be like if you ran the university for a day, right? I have that conversation with an imaginary person in my car during my commute at least once a week. And what I'm very excited about is that I really do feel that for every person on this meeting, if they ran the university, if these trained clinical professionals ran the university for a day, it would look like what these standards propose and what these standards envision for our performance. I think really the aspirational element of these standards is something that's going to be very beneficial to UW to help us improve the quality of what we do. And also really, I think having an independent sort of global framework to measure ourselves against is also going to do a lot to give our clinical workforce a more concentrated voice in how things are really run. I think that's really going to be something that we'll be able to take to campus and show as a measurable and, again, independently measured quantification and qualification of our success. So I hope as you learn a little bit more about the standards, be very, very eager to talk with anyone who has questions about them. This is something, as Betsy can attest to, is going to take an incredible team effort to accomplish, but it's something that can really be defining for our academic medical center and really help us to move forward in a very exciting way. So as I said, if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to talk with you, but I'll turn it over to Mary for a little bit more substance.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. I appreciate that. I have been working in clinical research. I just did a little calculation in my head. I'm in my 5th decade, which I really didn't want to admit to. I have either been running clinical trials myself, having an active role, or I've been managing clinical trial sites, both in the US as well as some of them in Western Europe. And we've known that we've needed standards for quite a while, and I'll be talking about that. But we've got a little bit of a time constraint, so I'm just going to go right into it. So who are we in terms of the people who have created these standards, and why are we doing this? We are the Site Accreditation and Standards Institute, and we lovingly call ourselves SASE. We began as part of the Alliance for Clinical Research Excellence and Safety, also known as ACRES, that was founded by Dr. Greg Koski out of Harvard and Mass Gen about 11, 12 years ago. And their idea was to apply systems thinking and systems engineering, if you will, to clinical trials. In order to try to streamline them, to make them more efficient, but without in any way, shape, or form giving up any kind of safety. And that's what they are still focused on, as well as patient advocacy, which was kind of alluded to by Betsy earlier on. SASE spun off as a separate institute about 4 years ago when we realized that we really needed to have a separate organization that was independent to be able to create these standards and then administer them, and also get a scheme forward for accreditation. Now, we do still share board members with ACRES. We still have a great relationship with them. The board chair for SASE is actually Dr. Briggs Morrison. If you know the pharma world, you know that Briggs has held major positions at Merck and at Pfizer, and most recently was the chief medical officer and senior executive vice president at AstraZeneca. So Briggs is a big proponent for us, and he's helped open some doors for us, and he is a very active member of the board. The other important piece that we've got in SASE is we partnered with the British Standards Institute, which is a company that has been around for a long time. They do have a royal charter from the Queen. They're a British company, clearly, but when they have the royal charter from the Queen, their original charter was from Queen Victoria. So they've been around for quite a while, and they do administer standards in many other industries like the automotive industry and the aeronautical industry. And they have been wonderful in partnering with us and helping us kind of stay on track to make sure that what we're creating are standards, not best practices, not regulations, things like that, so that they do achieve the goal that we're looking at. So we've got a great relationship with them. We've also got a really good relationship with the Quality Management Institute. And that is an organization that will provide all of the training. As you go through accreditation, you know, certain members of your staff will have to have certain types of training, and it's the QMI folks that will provide that for you. So Betsy and Kurt both alluded to the need for quality standards, and I can tell you that we first started talking about quality standards for clinical trial conduct at least 30 years ago. And I know that because I was part of a lot of those initiatives. And most of them, well, they all clearly failed. Most of them failing because we didn't have the partnership of a BSI and a QMI to be able to help us get there. And we really need those relationships. There's also been a paper out by Meisler that outlines really what the FDA wants to see in terms of quality. And basically he ends up just quoting David Burrow, who's the director of the Office of Scientific Investigations at FDA. You don't want to inspect quality into your site. You don't want to have to deal with the FDA telling you what's wrong to be able to get quality into your site. He calls that the kidney stone approach. In other words, the most painful, and believe me, it is. However, having said that, in my career, I had the opportunity to go out and visit many, many clinical sites. In some cases, our company wanted to partner with them. In other cases, we wanted to purchase them. In some cases, they were doing a good job for us in some areas of clinical research, and they wanted to expand. And I was sent to see, you know, could they do it or not? And what I found is many, many sites don't have any kind of quality system. They've got SOPs, they've got processes, but they really do not have a quality system, much less a comprehensive quality system. And that clearly is a problem. So why is this a problem? Well, people say, well, we've got compliance. We've got to be compliant. So therefore we've got quality. No, quality and compliance are not equal. If you had the opportunity to listen to Cindy Hopewell's presentation last July, and I really hope you did, my answer is just what she said, because she hit the nail on the head, and what she said was absolutely right. When I teach my students in the biotechnology program, I usually give them the example of, you've got a problem with your car and you bring it into one of the local dealerships to get it fixed. And they comply with all the regulations for OSHA to keep their people safe. They comply with all the regulations from the Department of Labor on how they pay them. They comply with all of the EPA regulations on how they dispose of their motor oil and their transmission fluid and all that. But if you have to bring your car back in 3 or 4 times until they actually fix it, I would, allege that that is not a quality organization. So you can comply with all of the regulations in your particular field and not do a quality job. Compliance is the lowest common denominator. You have to be in compliance to be able to run trials, unless you want to get 483s from the FDA or, God forbid, a warning letter. A comprehensive quality management system, which is what the standards basically require you to put in place in order to comply, does ensure compliance. But again, that is the bottom. That is, the basement. However, when you put in a quality system, the idea is to put in the processes and procedures to make sure you can do it right the first time. You prevent as many errors as you possibly can. You can't prevent every error. So then the next thing is to catch that error before it becomes impactful, either to a patient or to the data, or to anything else for that matter, before it can make an impact. and to figure out how to fix that error when it happens, and then maybe go back and try to avoid it in the future as well. So our philosophy at SASE, we started out with 2 basic goals in mind, and we keep these in mind as we continue to refine all of our standards and our own processes, is to protect patient safety. Absolutely, that is number 1. I always put confidentiality in there because clearly that's very important too. But protect patient safety and assure the integrity of the data. We want to make sure that when a sponsor is looking over their own data, or when a regulatory agency anywhere in the world, whether it's BfArM in Germany or the MHRA in the UK or Health Canada or Swissmedic, whoever it is, they can have a sense of comfort and they can rely on that data because they know that it was generated in a quality institution. And so they can make better decisions about the drugs and devices and laboratory tests that come to market. We wanted all the standards to be universally applied. We didn't want these standards to be US only or US and Western Europe only. And we in the United States do tend to be very US centric a lot of the times, but we have tried very hard to make these standards global. And I think we've seen that because we've actually got a group of sites in Africa that are very eager to start the process. We also wanted to make sure that it's universal and that all types of sites can conform to the standard. A large academic site, like you folks, a large healthcare system, maybe not associated with an academic medical center, a medical practice that also does some clinical trials, and a commercial site. Also, there are sites that are owned by some pharma companies. So it doesn't matter what type of site you are, how big you are, how little you are, where in the world you are. We wanted these standards to be able to be met, to conform to, and to apply to everyone. We certainly wanted them to be affordable. We wanted to make sure that as we develop these standards, they did not require any organization to make an investment in any kind of technology, whether hardware or software. So if you do everything on pen and paper, excuse me, and there are some small sites that still do that, fine and dandy, you can conform and you can get accredited. It's all about your quality management system. It's not about how sophisticated your computer system is. So we wanted to make sure everybody could afford it. And we were very adamant that the entire process be collegial and not adversarial. So the people that will talk to you about the conformance to the standards and will review the evidence that you provide to us about those standards are called surveyors. We didn't call them auditors. We didn't call them inspectors. We call them surveyors because we don't want to have any kind of inference that this might be, an adversarial relationship. It's not a gotcha culture. We're not going to go into your organization to, try to find something, necessarily try to be very, very picky. Now we're going to ask you, how you conform. We're going to ask you a lot of questions because we want to make sure that you really do have that robust, overarching, comprehensive quality management system in place. But there will also be support for the candidates for accreditation via an online forum. And as we get sites that are officially signing up to be accredited, and we get sites that have already been accredited, we hope that that forum becomes very robust. And many of us who are within SASE and our surveyors and that type of thing, we will participate in that too. It's not necessarily free consulting. If we find out that you really, really need a lot of help, we will probably refer you to someone else who can help you. But the idea will be that whatever sites want to share, if you have a problem, if you're having a problem conforming, or what would your strategy be, there will be people in that forum, hopefully, that can help you. And again, we want to make it realistic. We don't want it to take 15 years and thousands of dollars. We want people to be able to do it in a reasonable amount of time so that it's a realistic goal. So then we're going to talk a little bit now about what accreditation is, and then very importantly, what it is not. We do believe that it's going to set the bar for the conduct of clinical trials. Now, the basement, again, is compliance, but we want to set the bar a bit higher than that, again, so that all clinical studies are conducted within this quality network, okay? It will establish a culture of quality. And, culture, that famous quote says that, culture is what you do when no one is looking. So if you do that process correctly, if you take all the right steps, if you do what you're supposed to do when no one is looking, you're well on your way to a good quality culture. And part of what you'll hear in the Quality Management Institute training is a zero defects attitude. We all want to have that mindset that we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want anything to happen that we haven't foreseen. And we want to get away from this at a meeting mindset. This was very common, especially in the 80s and 90s, even in the quality groups, where if you found an error or you had a problem, you'd say, fine, well, we'll just have a meeting about that then. We'll make sure everybody gets together and talks about this all the time. There are only so many meetings you can add before it really becomes cumbersome and it's not a good use of your time. Now, I can tell you that I have seen a dosing error at a site, not one of mine, but one that we had used and called for a visit from the FDA, actually. And they decided that they were going to handle this error by, again, having a meeting around it. FDA accepted it because it's not FDA's job to determine the quality of that fix, just will it make the fix? And it probably will. Is it the best fix? Absolutely not. One of the other things that conforming to the standards will almost force you to do is require proof of effectiveness of all of your processes and your procedures. I really like it because it closes the loop. If you're familiar with Six Sigma philosophy, you know that one of the last pieces of review. After you've done your process improvement, you go back and you look at that process again, whether it's 6 weeks later or 6 months later, depending upon what the process is. And first of all, you make sure that people are still following the new process, because we're all human. We all can fall back into ways that we feel are much more familiar and much more comfortable. So you've got to, first of all, make sure that people are adhering to the new process. And then you've got to generate some data to show that it's actually doing what you thought it would, okay? You have to have some of that data. It also requires closing the loop with what I used to have at one of my sites was we had what we called a bloodless autopsy. After every study, we brought in the PI, the QA auditor, the project manager, and everybody else. What went right in this study, but what also went wrong in this study? And what do we need to fix? And as we went through the fix then, we made sure that it was communicated throughout the organization. And Betsy alluded to that as well. You have an error or you've got something that went wrong, you figure out how to fix it, you don't keep it to yourself. You've got to advertise it throughout everybody else. The goal again, protect patient safety and assure the integrity of the data. Now, for what accreditation is not. It is not the be all and the end all for clinical trial quality, because it is not best practices, which is about 3 bullets down from that. You can always go above and beyond the standards. That would be fabulous. Do it if you can. If that's the way you want to work, do it. But again, we're setting the bar on where quality for clinical trials should be. Also, accreditation is not an open invitation to create bundles and bundles and oodles of SOPs. And I will beg of you, please don't do that. That's not the point. The way I was trained, SOPs are those processes and procedures that basically are generated to make sure you're in compliance. So in relation to the regulations. So you'll have SOPs on how to submit to the IRB and how to ensure that you have IRB approval before you start a study and how you get informed consent and how you deal with an unexpected adverse event. I went to a site once where I was hired and needed to fix quite a bit. And they had SOPs because of their philosophy on things like how to deal with petty cash and how to start an IV and how to use an ECG machine. Well, you need processes for that, but they don't need to be SOPs, because SOPs should be kind of set in stone and they should be very difficult to change. Processes and procedures should be a lot easier to change, so that if you go from Marquette ECG machines to HP ECG machines, it's a pretty easy fix. You change your process and your procedure. So please do not take this as an open invitation to just create rules and oodles of SOPs. Accreditation is also not meant to just release you from any site quality audits. And I'm going to very specifically say site quality audits. Many of you are probably familiar with the pre-study qualification visit. It's usually done by a monitor, a study monitor. They'll come in and spend maybe half a day. They usually have a series of check boxes and all of that. What I am talking about here are actual quality audits. People that come in have credentials as quality professionals. They're from the sponsor's quality assurance unit, and they're usually at your site for 2 to 3 days. And they may be there longer if they find stuff. But accreditation will not, it's not your get out of jail free card for quality audits. However, it should make them a lot less painful, okay? It is also not an automatic qualification to conduct any study under the sun. However, it may buy you a seat at the table. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, how do you go about getting accreditation? And again, this is a flyover at a very high altitude. The first thing you really need to do is to take a look at the standards. They're published on our website, sassy.accreditation.org, and see what you're getting yourself into. Determine the scope of accreditation, and this is specifically important for an organization of your size. Many of the sites that we've got that are going through accreditation are single sites, maybe 20 to 40 research personnel, pretty cut and dried, pretty easy, maybe one location. We've got some organizations that have multiple locations, a little bit more of a challenge. But large medical centers, large academic centers definitely are going to have to decide what piece of the organization are they going to go for accreditation with. You want something you can get your arms around, something that's not going to take 10 years to do. And you want to be able to get it done as efficiently as possible. What location is it? Maybe what department? Maybe what type of study? We will have a conversation with you. We actually have built in a formal meeting about scoping when you first decide that you want to go for accreditation. We also have to determine the number of staff involved in accreditation, because especially in larger organizations, many people have dual or even triple responsibilities. They're not 100% devoted to clinical trials. That's important because of the training that comes from the Quality Management Institute, and we have instituted some quotas. 25% of your clinical trial staff must earn that CRQM, which is a Clinical Research Quality Manager credential. And you may have noticed on that first slide, I have that credential after my name. I earned it several years ago. And I'm sure anybody in the quality assurance groups of my clinics that I've had many spirited discussions with, are probably, wondering how the heck that happened. But you will go through the training, you will be able to get that credential. And then also another 50% of your clinical trial staff will go through what we call kind of the basic training. It's called Keeping the Promise. So that overall 75% of your staff will have QMI training. So as that happens, and once you, officially sign up, we will give you access to a program in ACESIS. And this is a program that was designed specifically for us. The standards are all in there. You will designate different people in your organization or wherever you want to be able to enter evidence of conformance to each of those standards. And you do that until you are satisfied that you've got evidence of conformance to all of the standards and you feel comfortable with it. Then you tell us, and we will take the surveyors that are assigned to your site. The number of surveyors will depend on the scope, right? And we will review it, and then we will get together with you and we will set up video conferences every week. And we will go through it standard by standard, and you will explain to us how you conform. And we will ask a lot of questions. We have been asking a lot of questions. How does this work? How does that work? Tell me what happens when. We don't want to check boxes. We want to make sure that your processes are effective and that you're evaluating them appropriately. So we do ask a lot of questions. Once the video conferences are over, you will go back and you'll probably have some editing to do, maybe some more uploading of some more evidence to do. And again, when you're satisfied with that you've answered everything, you'll tell us, we'll look at it. There may be some back and forth. And then once we, as the surveyors, are satisfied that you really have shown us evidence of conformance to all the standards, then and only then, we will set up a site visit. And we'll probably be there about a day. And for that day, we'll go through everything. We'll talk maybe to some of your staff. We'll take a look at your environment. And then we'll write a report with our recommendation in it that will go to the Accreditation Council. And they typically would go through and take the recommendation. You get accredited, it goes up on our website, you can start advertising it, et cetera, et cetera. So right at the end here, let's just talk a little bit about what's in it for me and what's in it for us. So you as an individual and us, meaning your organization. As an individual, and I think Betsy did allude to this a little bit, you will feel that there's a more responsive organization, that you have more of a say in things, that that ineffective processes or things that are wrong maybe are identified sooner and fixed sooner. And hopefully the fixes are better. You should feel that you have a voice in the processes, especially and including training. Again, one of the things that the accreditation process requires is, say, for a training program, not only do you take people through training and, you know, check all the boxes and document it, but then you go back at several different times and you say, okay, how has the training been? You ask the people who work with that person. You can even ask sponsors that have worked with it. And you certainly ask that person involved, did you feel like you were prepared when we put you into this role? Did you feel that your training was good, et cetera, et cetera? And if you identify weaknesses, then you work to shore those up. You should have a much more supportive culture because management has your back, since quality will not be compromised. So you should feel much more supported than you would in another organization. And one of the things that we certainly have found is that when you have that kind of buy-in, when you've got a good quality organization and people are well trained and feel that they know how to do their job, that it helps stabilize the workforce and reduce turnover. You know, we know people are always going to leave, but we don't want people leaving because they said, oh my gosh, you know, they threw me into the deep end. I didn't know what I was doing and all this type of thing. And they wouldn't let me get trained. They didn't give me enough time to do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But when you have a good quality management system and again, a good, robust training program, you do stabilize that workforce and you do reduce turnover. So as an organization, Kurt talked about this. What we used to talk about in the CRO business was quality is table stakes. If you don't have demonstrated quality, you won't even get asked to look at studies. You have no idea how many studies you're missing because clients don't feel you have the quality. You're not even asked to the table. So getting accredited can buy you a seat at the table. Interestingly enough, we've had some pharma companies tell us that they will be very interested when we get a critical mass of accredited sites on making an internal company policy about only using accredited sites. So that's kind of interesting. But having this overall quality management program does lead to consistent performance, study after study after study, no matter what department you're in, what location you're in, what type of study you're doing. If you're accredited, you should have that consistency of performance. Again, accreditation won't eliminate quality audits from sponsors, but it should make them a lot less painful. One of the nice things that comes about when everybody is on the same quality mindset is that your quality group, your QA group, they become your partner. They're not your enemy and they're not your policeman. And that's tended to be what QA groups have been in the past. And it's so much better when they work as your partner. And I've had some great QA partners in the past, and they can work as your partner. You know, there's always going to be some friction between operations and QA, and you have to find the right middle ground. But when you both have that same quality mindset, it's a whole lot easier. When you have these, you know, repeated strong performances and all that consistency, your client relationships get stronger and stronger and stronger because now you have a great track record of good performance and quality data and all of that. So this comprehensive management system, again, kind of closes that loop with respect to improving processes and avoiding errors. And that's what you want. That's what we all want. Again, our major focus is to protect patient safety. And the way to do that is to run a quality trial, right? Make sure that the people that you're putting in the trial are appropriate, taking care of them the right way according to the trial, and generating quality data and protecting the integrity of that data so that when any regulatory agency anywhere in the world sees it, they can rely on it and they can make really good decisions on whether or not certain products should come to market. And that is all I have. So Betsy, I think I toss it back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary. Really appreciate your presentation. I think that was extremely helpful. And we do have a couple questions. I think, Mary, this might be one that you can address. For those of us who struggle with navigating members of historically excluded populations in clinical research and trials, what is the highest priority message you advise we use in regards to how SASE and health equity might connect?
Ah, well, there are standards around recruitment and looking at recruitment and looking at the types of populations you can find, and again, how to make it more effective so that you look at it and you look at what's working and what's not working. I think health equity is something we all have to be very aware of. And as we all know, there are regulations pending at FDA to require diversity in clinical trials. You know, back in the late 90s, when the regulations were changed overnight, that all of a sudden said women have to be represented, things turned on a dime. And I think things are going to turn again. So I think with us, it's mostly just, you know, conforming to the standards, but also making sure that if you are recruiting underserved populations, that they are going to be treated right. I mean, it is a quality organization, and you know, we certainly don't want to have any disparities in the way different populations are treated in a clinical trial.
And Betsy, can I just add one thing really quickly? Because
Of
this
course.
is something that's been coming up in a lot of discussions in terms of, as Mary said, one of the things that I think is really important about these standards is that any organization, and we saw this during the pressure testing, we saw sites that were certainly resource rich, we saw sites that literally were pencil and paper. Either one of those sites could get accredited if the processes are there. And I think that's very important in the health disparity space, because as we are identifying and locating more and more populations based on social determinant factors and things like that, those sites that are in proximity to those populations are going to be very, very popular and are really going to be targeted. And I was on a call last week with some folks from NIH and was told we are not allowed to use the term exploitation. The term is now overindulgence of attention instead of exploitation. But to have this really robust and scalable process in place, you know, something that could be replicated, I think globally will be very important as well in that space.
Yeah, and I would say, I think I mentioned that we've got a group of sites in Africa that are very interested. And while they do have some funding from their government, I would not say they are anywhere near resource rich. And they are very eligible from what we can tell from our conversations with them, as eligible as any site in the US to be able to achieve accreditation.
Great, thanks, Mary and Kurt. There's another question here. How many, if any, sites are accredited, and are any of them big academic centers like ours?
Well, the easy answer to that is there are no accreditations yet. We had expected the first accreditations to happen somewhere between June and September of 2020 until COVID reared its ugly head. And we had gone through the video conferences, et cetera, et cetera. We were getting ready actually to schedule the site visits. And unfortunately, the sites that were first in line were sites that were very, very seriously impacted by that. They were just trying to survive in some ways. And so they are now just kind of starting to pick up the pieces in many ways and re-engage. We do have a couple academic sites who are also getting ready to take that first step, and then COVID hit. And I'm sure, as you folks at UW know, they really haven't been able to, you know, put their head above water in a long time once COVID hit. So again, we're re-engaging with them. At the moment, we've got a group of 8 sites in the United States that we're getting ready to start with here in the next couple of weeks. And so they're going to be, they're using it for some commercial purposes. And I think you're going to see some health equity pieces in their accreditations as well. So we're 2 years behind, but, you know, kind of so is everybody else, unfortunately, but we're starting to get there.
Mary, what is the estimated time for a center to become accredited? Is there a certain set time frame, or can it be variable?
So the first thing I had on my list was, you know, look at the standards at the website, and it will depend on your organization. Where are you with that. I mean, if you look at those standards and went, oh my gosh, we don't have anything, or if you look at them and we go, yeah, we've got 75, 80% of these, that's your prep time. Once you formally engage, you sign on the dotted line that we want to finish everything within 1 year. And I think that's probably pretty good, because you really shouldn't be signing up unless you've really looked at those standards and you have a good idea that you can conform with most of those. I mean, you don't have to have it all done before you start, but you also shouldn't be sitting there thinking, oh, throwing up your hands and saying, I don't even know where to start. So the preparation is going to make the difference.
Okay, great. So Kurt, this one might be for you. What feedback has SASE gotten from regulatory agencies and/or sponsors around the accreditation process?
So, and Mary can chime in on this as well, but very early in the process of once the standards, I think, had been developed, and I think we had gone through pressure testing, the leadership from SASE actually met with the FDA. And I remember that meeting was delayed because of the volume of FDA professionals who wanted to participate. And I think there were close to 40 who participated. And I think the outcome of that discussion was, this isn't something the FDA can do, but it's certainly something that will significantly impact them. That is something that is going to be very collaborative with their purpose. And I'd be very glad. There've been a lot of articles. One of the articles, the Meisler article that Mary referenced, I thought it was an incredible endorsement. I know they aren't, the FDA is not allowed to endorse, but it essentially, really very clearly seem to be sending sites in this direction of the accreditation, that it is a quality culture, not a quality or a system that is almost activated by non-compliance. It is the quality culture that they're looking for. So certainly from a regulatory standpoint, I think that's been the biggest. Again, we can't call it an endorsement, but that's what it is. From a sponsor standpoint, as I said, this is something that certainly in the discussions that I'm having with sponsors around a number of related research areas, this is something that is, right now for us, it is an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity that's going to turn into a mandate. I really do. I think this is something that is a long time coming and is going to become an expectation of sponsors. Yeah. And again, as Mary alluded to, particularly CROs or sponsors who are looking at us as a site, not just as a home of an individual study, but as a comprehensive site. It makes us so user-friendly. When they can come in, look at and evaluate and audit the quality system that is the basis of the accreditation, and know that studies conducted under that quality system will be run in accordance to it. That makes us so user-friendly. So I'm very glad, whoever that was, very glad to talk to you about this much more and send any links, because as I said, I don't think there's any argument that this really is the best thing for clinical research and that this is the future. So.
Great, thank you. And I think the last question was, has UW defined who will be included in its accreditation? And I think that's, to answer that question, that's part of what Mary was talking about in her slides. As a huge academic medical center, we really need to define what and who will be covered in the accreditation. Yes. And so that's one of the first steps that we'll be doing. So it hasn't been defined just yet, but that will be coming very soon.
Yeah, and that is critical to success.
And if I could just add to that really quickly, it is very likely we would have more than one accreditation at UW.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's very important. And also, again, whoever you were who asked the question, this is a great opportunity to be encouraging departments, your department leadership, to sort of come under this umbrella. And again, please reach out with any questions or if you want to learn more.
Great, thank you so much. That's all for the questions. So appreciate both of you so much.